So hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for being here today. This session will look at one of the activities currently underway in the RDA TIGER project. You already heard a little bit about our project yesterday in the opening session, and today we'll dig a little bit deeper on a few topics. Today we're here to gather community insights on how you adopt RDA outputs and the impact of the outputs on various things in Europe. So first, hi, I'm Alex Elipalta. I'm the director of the European Office of the Research Data Alliance. And first, I will go through a quick icebreaker so that we can warm up. Then we will go through the aims of today's session and a little bit of context. Then I'll pass on to my colleague Ryan O'Connor, who will explain a little bit more about this landscape we are working on in this project and some more details about what the project is all about. Then this is an interactive session, so we hope to get your input into our report through a Menti, facilitated again by Ryan. We will move on to a group discussion where we hope to hear from you a little bit more, and you will be invited to unmute and hopefully we will have a good conversation. Then we'll pass on to Lisa Lesalu, who will give you an overview of some current and upcoming support opportunities within the project. And then we'll wrap up. This session is recorded, so if you do not wish to appear in any recordings, please make sure to turn off your camera. So, aims of today's session. We are working on a large-scale landscape report at the moment, and we are examining the value and impact of RDA on the EOSC ecosystem. We've started off looking at Tiger-supported working groups, and we are now expanding to the wider outputs produced in the RDA and their uptake in EOSC, the EOSC ecosystem, including Horizon Europe projects. We are looking at all sorts of EOSC activities, opportunity areas, task forces. We want to understand how the RDA is used and implemented within this context. Why we're here today? Why we're doing this. We want to produce a resource for the European data communities to help the communities navigate the multiple EOSC relevant RDA outputs and recommendations, first of all. And then we also want to verbalize the impact that this community has in a tangible way, because it's a community that is global, it's free, and it's open to everyone. And we want to understand and to verbalize how this is impacting the region and key initiatives in the region. So why we're here today? We are here to get your input. How do you use the RDA outputs and recommendations? We want to do a quick sense check. Is our report on the right track? Are we looking into the right things? And the feedback that we will receive today is going to feed into this report. The various outcomes of this report will be published throughout 2025. We have already published one blog looking at the Tiger-supported working groups and their impact in the EOSC ecosystem, and Ryan will talk about this a little bit more later on. And the full report will be published at the end of the year as we go into the end of the RDA TIGER project. If you made it here today and you're not from Europe, because I actually can't see the list of participants here, but if you did make it here and you're not from the region, do not worry, because we hope that there are messages and lessons to be learned regardless. So we hope that you can maybe leave the session with some takeaways about how the impact that we are outlining in Europe can perhaps be translated or mirrored in similar structures globally. So hopefully this session can be useful for everybody. And with that, that's all for me. No, actually, sorry, before I pass on to Ryan, we have to get their warm-up session. So now we'll switch on to our icebreaker and we can get to know each other. So if you can navigate to menti.com and use the code 88265040, please. And I'll get to the right page of the Menti. There we go. So give it a few seconds for everybody to get there. Okay. So what time of the day is it for you right now? Morning, afternoon, evening, night, or who knows? During the plenaries, this is a global event, so time doesn't really matter. Okay. 7 people in the afternoon, morning for a couple of people, morning for 1 person, nighttime for 2 people, and 2 people are in the same boat as myself. Okay, good to know. Okay. Seems to be a more reasonable time for the majority of people here. So many thanks for those joining from the evening, night, and who knows categories. We appreciate you being here. Okay, people still voting, which means that people are just getting on the Menti, so we'll give it a few more seconds. Okay, I think that's us. Next. What's the weather like in your corner of the globe? Is it sunny? Is it cloudy, windy, warm rain, cold rain? Don't know which one's worse. Or are you buried in an office that doesn't consider weather? Sunny for everybody. Excellent. Excellent ratio. Few clouds. Okay. Sunny for most people. I am incredibly jealous. I am in the windy/cold rain category. Next, so what are you doing during this virtual plenary? Are you presenting? Are you chairing? Are you just participating? Or are you doing a little bit of everything? Okay, a few chairs, presenter, several participants, and several people doing a bit of everything. But mostly participants. Great, thank you. So keeping the sunshine in mind, I will go back to sharing and hand over to my colleague Ryan, who will provide some more context about the project and the landscape report.
Thanks, Alex. Hi everybody. I just put so welcome everybody. First of all, another welcome. Just repeat what Alex said earlier. Thanks for joining. And yeah, as Alex was saying, I know we've pitched this session as a kind of a European focus, but there's absolutely things we hope we can learn from people outside the European landscape, and hopefully people can maybe pick up a few things from us as well. Yeah, so and I've just for those of you who kind of joined us lately, I put into the chat there a link to the slides we're using, so all the details will be there, and I think all the hyperlinks should be pretty active there as well. So if you want to kind of follow through to anything we're talking about, feel free to do so. Yeah, so first of all, I will give a little bit of background on the RDA Tiger project in general, and I will go on then to look a little bit more detail on this landscape activity we're doing. Landscaping is gardening, just to keep that in mind. Landscape activity we're going to be doing over the next couple of months, and we have initiated it, and this is a key step in it now. We have an idea of what we want to do and where we want to go, but it's absolutely vital that we get some community feedback and maybe, yeah, just kind of input on what we're doing and seeing if there's any areas the community feels that we could would be more fruitful or more advantageous for us to focus on. And as I said, I will have another Menti to present in a few minutes' time. That questions will be a little bit more detailed, so we will sort of take our time over that. I think there's 6 or 7 questions. Some of them are a little bit more detailed. There is kind of a mixture of sort of set answers and free text as well. So, but we will have time to sort of consider those properly, and a little bit of space then for any discussion that comes up towards the end. But first, before we get onto that, this may be new information to some of you. I know I recognize a lot of the names in the Zoom participants list, so this will probably be not news to a lot of you. But in any case, just so everyone's on the same page, I think it would be good to give just a brief background of the RDA Tiger project, and just where we are at the. Excuse me. So yeah, so the RDA Tiger project was initiated back in start of 2023. We're finishing up at the end of 2025, so we're in the last 9 months or so of the project. Um, it's a Horizon Europe European Commission funded project, which is kind of run by four consortium partners, ourselves, RDA Europe, along with our colleagues, CoData, based in France, DANCE, who are based in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands eScience Centre. So essentially what we're doing is, as you can see here in the diagram on the left, we're looking at various ways that we can support RDA working groups and the wider RDA community by extension. So we're doing this in a number of ways. The first there in the yellow circle is the in-kind support, which I kind of spoke about yesterday at the plenary session, focusing on the facilitation support, but we provide a range of in-kind services to RDA working groups, including facilitation support, but also communication support, support for outreach, support for adoption, development, and then as well landscape and engagement support as well. So these are available to all RDA groups subject to application, sort of from right through at any stage of the working group's life cycle. We're also providing two kinds of financial support. So one of these is the engagement of external experts, which provides smaller grants for groups who are looking to engage with expertise or bring in expertise that may not exist in their group. So we provide sort of small financial support packages for these, and we also have larger cascading grants. So we have recently awarded the first round of these, first of two rounds, to 3 projects, which we're very excited to support. And we have a second round of the Cascade Grant open at the moment. My colleague Lisa Letsalu will give a brief update of where we are with these towards the end of the session. Finally, then the kind of fourth sort of pillar really in the RDA Tiger project is the RDA knowledge base. So this is a kind of a suite of sort of tools and services that are being developed by the project consortium, which aim to structure a lot of the information that is available that has been sort of generated over the years by the RDA community and make that available in a kind of queryable, useful way, and give a path to sort of making all RDA objects really that relate to the community more findable, more accessible, and basically, without veering into the FAIR principles, more discoverable. Next slide, please, Alex. Yeah, so first, so as I said, we're well over halfway. We're into the final sort of leg of the RDA Tiger project, and I think it would be good to just give a summary of kind of some of what we have achieved so far. So as I mentioned yesterday on the plenary, the opening session plenary talk, the brief talk I gave there, we have facilitated so far in the life cycle of the project 20 working groups. So that's 20 separate working groups who've received facilitation support. So 11 of these groups we've kind of stewarded through the statement of work, what used to be known as a case statement approval process. And we currently have 13 sessions taking place at P24 of groups we have supported, which is really good. Next, Alex, there. Yeah, and we also, as well as I said, that we have those other types of support available as well. So we have also supported 3 other groups who have received specialized communication support, and some of those groups have been able to sort of contribute to this plenary as well. And yeah, and just Alex, you can just skip on this a few there, just get them all up on screen. So as I mentioned as well, we have those other financial support mechanisms available. Those are the Cascade grants and those external expertise grants. So to date we have awarded 6 of those smaller grants to a total of €30,000. And as I said, we have 3 Cascade project grantees whose projects are getting underway at the moment, or well underway actually in most cases. Then we have that second Cascade grant open at the moment. Yeah, and just one of the kind of mechanisms we also use is to make sure we're doing right by the groups we're supporting, especially when it comes to in-kind services, is we have a kind of mechanism for gathering feedback. So by and large, we've received positive feedback, which is really good, both sort of via the kind of forums and things we have available to people, and also kind of anecdotally, which is really positive to hear. And in the very sort of when we have opportunities to speak to people outside RDA, the kind of the services we provide are sort of we do get a sense that groups or initiatives similar to RDA or who have kind of overlapping sort of concerns would benefit from those similar type services. So it's really good to see that. It makes our work easier if we know what we're doing is appreciated. And we some of the quotes there from some of the feedback on screen, which is nice to read. Next. Yeah, so a bit, so I'll go into a bit now about the actual Tiger impact landscape report now itself. So yeah, so just to take a slight step back. So one of the, so obviously, as I mentioned, we're funded by Horizon Europe, by the European Commission. So as such, we kind of have to make sure that all the activities we do support in some way, whether directly or possibly indirectly, these various different priorities that inform all these European activities. So yeah, we have as I said, we have these open calls for selecting groups to support, and one of the criteria by which we judge the groups to support and not to support is the extent to which they sort of align with a couple of kind of these overarching principles. So these include the RDA strategic plan, which is available on the RDA website, how they sort of how the group's intended activities support the kind of general open science principles, usually the EU and ESCO ones are the usual ones we refer to, or FAIR principles, and specifically the European Open Science Cloud areas of concern, so the EOSC, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. And those, that is the one that we're kind of focusing on for this impact landscape report. So the sort of main criteria for this EOSC areas of concern are defined in what I've called here the SRIA, which is the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda. It's a pretty extensive document that was last published November 2023. It's a new version is due hopefully in the next couple of months. But yeah, this is what we kind of draw on to structure what we're doing with this report. Yeah, so just again, just a bit of background on why we're taking on this activity. So as I mentioned earlier, the project has been like we've kind of set some KPIs and sort of intended targets early on the project, but we've sort of overshot most, if not all of them, are on course to overshoot them. So we essentially kind of it's been very successful from what the kind of criteria we had set out. Based on that, we thought it would be good in the second half of the project to seek an amendment from our funder to essentially answer those wider questions about not necessarily what if we're satisfying those criteria that our funder would have set out originally, but what additional areas of additional areas of impact that the groups we're supporting are having. So yeah, so I've kind of listed here a few of those questions that we're looking to answer for this with this project. So essentially, where do the activities of Tiger supported working groups and RDA working groups in general align with these EOSC and kind of European level concerns, some of which I'll detail a bit more in the next slide. And where the specific areas of impact, where is there potential for activities that are taking place right now by Tiger supported working groups and other groups, where there are areas where these activities can sort of align with European level initiatives, and where can they have kind of real impact, and where is there potential for uptake of RDA recommendations and outputs. And then we're also looking back kind of slightly retrospectively to say, okay, where maybe something that can sort of inform how we go forward and ensure that the impact of the currently active groups is most effective. Where has there previously been uptake of RDA working groups outputs? So we're doing a number of ways we're sort of gathering information around that. And one of those ways is today. So we will be moving on to the Menti in a few minutes. With that question, that third question is kind of a big part of what's motivating us today. Yeah, let's see if you can go on to the next slide. Yeah, so just looking at the specific aspects of the report itself. So yeah, the title of the report is D3.6. That's for sort of internal purposes, but the the title is Landscape Analysis on the Value of RDA Outputs to EOSC. So essentially what we're doing is mapping the alignment of working groups and working group outputs with various aspects of European landscape. So these include as I mentioned, the SRIA implementation challenges and the priority areas, which are specific aspects of the SRIA report. Also, we're looking at the activities of the currently active EOSC association task forces and the sort of opportunity area expert groups, which are kind of set of groups that are focusing on specific thematic issues to do with supporting EOSC. We're looking at EOSC-related Horizon Europe projects. So there's projects that are currently underway or also kind of that are sort of set to start in the next year or so, or maybe 2 years. We're also looking then a bit further beyond the EOSC-specific landscape. So we're looking at kind of European Research Infrastructure Consortia, the ERICs, and the European Strategic Forum on Research Infrastructures, or ESFRIs. We're also looking at the impact of RDA working group outputs on various different European national strategies. So that's quite a general statement, but that's kind of what we're approaching it at the moment to see where if there has been any impact of RDA working group outputs on the development of kind of open science or open access or any sort of policies at a national level and strategies as well. Sorry, I just have the chat open on the side there. The slides are available. If someone could just copy and paste the slides into the chat there, just so I think just so everyone has them. Maybe there's a few latecomers. And just sorry, going back to the slide that I'm looking at. So the final two areas that we're looking at then is these common European data spaces, which are a bit less well defined at present, and the EOSC nodes as well, which are currently in the process of I think they're currently in the process of ratifying the first few of those. Yeah, Alex, if you can go on to the next. Yep. So as Alex mentioned there earlier, I have put together, so at the end of last year, we put together an initial sort of tentative analysis of just focusing specifically on RDA Tiger working groups and how they map onto some of these selected aspects of the European landscape. And there's a blog published on the RDA website, so if your QR code, I helpfully didn't put in the URL there, but I'm sure someone will be able to dig that out and put it into the chat. Yeah, I think the next slide is, so the next stage is the Menti. So as I said, we have a couple of questions that we want to put to everybody. So there is a QR code on screen, or if you can just re-navigate to menti.com and maybe enter the code, or we do have a tiny URL there as well. So it's tinyurl.com/RDA Tiger P24. So Alex, if you can stop sharing, I will take over. And before I share the Menti, I will push that hyperlink in the chat just to make it a bit easier for people to navigate. So that is the link to the Menti. So I'll close the icebreaker Menti. I will look at, okay. Now I will share my screen. Okay, is everyone seeing nope. Everyone seeing presentation mode? Is it showing my bookmarks toolbar?
It is.
It is, okay. Well, I'll try to escape out of that and do it properly. Oh, but no, is that full screen now? Yeah, perfect. Great. So, okay, cool. I see a few thumbs up there in the corner. Yeah, so I'll just give it another minute. So if I see there's about 30 plus, maybe 40 people on the call. So I see if you manage to get onto this page, could you just hit the thumbs up? So I'm looking at 18, 19, 20 in the corner, just so make sure we get the majority of people here. Because as I said, the earlier Menti was quite light-hearted, but we do need input here. And absolutely everyone's input would be valuable here. So if everyone could navigate to the page and just let me know with the thumbs up in the corner, that would be great. I'll give another 10 seconds or so. 96 people. Yeah, look, sure, in the interest of time, I'll fire ahead and we'll go to the next question. But as I said, that link to the Menti is in the tiny URL link is in the chat there, so please use that if you get left behind, you can catch up. Yeah, so I'll just go to the oh, here we are. I will go to the first question. So yeah, so as I said, now we've covered some of the areas that we're looking at with this report. But what I want to ask is anybody on the call involved in any of the EOSC or European research data landscape related activities already mentioned? So are people members of? You should be able to select multiple things here, so it's not just one response. So if you are involved in multiple things, please let us know. Oh, unfortunately, that's a percentage. It's not a count. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say that is 100% of everybody is involved in in Horizon Europe projects. Should
Yeah.
I try and change it now, Ryan? Do you think?
Um,
Can I change
Possibly.
it while it's still going?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, we
We
just
can
need to
log in.
practice our math.
Yeah.
73% out of 17 respondents.
Yeah. In any case, so I'll just read out the options. I'll actually do that. Maybe I might be able to refresh my screen in a minute and we can get the counts rather than percentages. But in any case, yeah, so the options are the EOSC Association task forces, I mentioned, the EOSC Association opportunity area expert groups, ERICS, the European Research Infrastructure Consortia, Horizon Europe funded projects. Oh, yeah, I see the totals now, not percentages. Thank you, Alex. So Horizon Europe funded projects, which is by far the largest there, competence centers, the common European data spaces, EOSC nodes, and other. We don't, unfortunately, Menti is limited in the sense of I'd like to have a text box that people could add in the other, but that is interesting. Maybe people can, we can circle back to that later, see what other other initiatives that people are involved in that are useful. So yeah, as expected, I guess we were expecting a lot of people to be involved in Horizon Europe funded projects. These are the sort of largest scope, but it's interesting to see that people are involved in the EOSC nodes. That's quite an interesting result here, and task forces and opportunity area expert groups as well.
Yeah, good point in the comments, Stephanie. We should have added a none option.
Yeah.
But I was
Yeah.
wondering, the people that said none, should we is anyone willing to either post it in the chat or maybe unmute and tell us what other is? S-freeze our eyes. Yeah, good point.
S3, yeah. Yeah, it might be a good idea maybe if we put that in the chat and we can record that. And maybe we can circle back to it later. Okay. Let's move on to the next question. So thanks everybody, and thanks Alex for changing that counts to percentages to counts in the last minute. So the next slide then. So this isn't just confined to people working in the European landscape, but so we want inputs from everybody here. Have you used any RDA recommendations and or supporting outputs in your work? And if so, if yes, how? So the options that we've given here are to develop, if you're involved in developing policies or guidelines at any level, sort of like they can be just sort of ad hoc guidelines or kind of more institutional formal guidelines or policies, to develop and or implement technical infrastructure as part of active research data and or software curation or management, as part of kind of any sort of landscape analysis or review, or even just kind of like almost kind of like we're thinking there as well, sort of even if it's kind of from the point of view of like a literature review almost. As part as teaching material or part of a curriculum development, or to support efforts towards formal standardization. So yeah, so I think that good to see there's a relatively even spread among the sections here. So part of the active research data management or software curation and management is we expect to see that, but developing policies, guidelines, and for landscape analysis, those are the second most populated answers. But yeah, a relatively even spread, I think.
I see Stephanie's comment that not personally, but her organization has, and I think that's part of why we phrase this question like this. Finding out organizations that adopt outputs is relatively straightforward, in many cases via the RDA adoption reporting. We want to hear, are people using it in any other ways in their day-to-day, even if their organization hasn't actively adopted or on paper adopted.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I can't see the chat while I'll have this on screen, but if there's any, yeah, please do just cut in there if anything else of interest comes up. Okay, great. And I think the option or the response have slowed down a bit there, but really good to see that there's sort of a wide. I think we've hopefully covered a lot of those eventualities, but there's obviously some where we won't have covered.
I do have one question before we move on, Ryan. Sorry for me. So are the responses here, the people responding, are you responding on behalf of an organization or are you also responding personally? Maybe in the chat, maybe we can put something in the chat or feel free to unmute. I see two people, so personally, okay, that's great.
I think that we were sort of leaving that general I guess it depends that some of those whether it's personal or whether it's sort of as part of a kind of more formal role, it would depend on the answers. But I think yeah, if, like for instance, that option on you create or using the RDA outputs for sort of data curation, that type of thing. If it was people using the information available from RDA as part of that, there might be a more individual role. But obviously, if you're developing policies, then or taking part of a team with a team that's developing policies, then you're going to be at a more institutional level. But yeah, in any case, the next question here is a free text question. So I'll give an extra bit of time here because we will look to give people a chance to actually respond to this. So are there any other ways that RDA recommendations and or supporting outputs are used that weren't included in the previous question? So I can quickly skip back, look at just open the previous question, just so these are the ways we were looking at. So the kind of 6 options we gave. But if there's any other ways that RDA recommendations or outputs have been used by you, or even that you know of, if you're involved with groups themselves, how they've been implemented, if you could maybe describe that as part of the as part of this question. And yeah, I think that's the first response there. No, that's good to know. That's a negative response is a response. Not negative, but like a sort of a response that doesn't fall
That
outside the
acknowledges,
previous category. Yeah.
yeah, that acknowledges that we're doing exactly what we should be doing.
Well, yeah, maybe. But then there are 3 further responses that would maybe suggest we haven't covered all eventualities. But as I said, now everything, all the responses here are useful. So we've a response here: self-assessment of research data services. That could, yeah, admittedly, yeah, that could fall within the sort of curation management. I guess, but if it's a services, if you're looking at it from a services level, yeah, I think that would sort of justifiably have one foot in that category in the previous slide and another foot in this response here.
Sorry, Ryan, there's a comment in the chat. Michelle is asking if we're considering networks, the interest groups and working groups as outputs. So this is a great question because the RDA is a community and it is one big global network. So perhaps we should, but for the purposes of the landscape report, we have looked at the formal outputs, the formal definition within the RDA.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, there's a few further responses there on using the recommendations and outputs to define projects. I think someone gave an example of the GORC. So that would be, for those who aren't aware, that's the Global Open Research Commons. I'm assuming it's the international model that's the output of that GORC working group, which has been implemented quite extensively. But yeah, using it in defining a project, that's a very valid use. And thanks for adding that. And next response then is guidance for project partners and the sector in general. Again, yeah, that's possibly included in teaching material, but I think it justifies its own sort of individual response here as part to defining gaps. Another no response. Using the core trust seal as resulting from to use 2 mentions of core trust seal there. to apply for a certification. So that's for those who aren't familiar with that. That's the working group that set up the certification or the criteria for certification for trustworthy repositories for Core Trust Seal. That was a number of years ago now. But yeah, that output can be used for kind of self-assessment and also as part of the pursuit towards formal certification. Informing own policies with a question mark. So I'd be interested to hear maybe if whoever put that in could elaborate on that. Feel free to enter another. I think you should be able to enter another response there. But informing your own policies is interesting. Maybe that kind of falls in under the sort of just kind of upskilling yourself, or maybe kind of informing yourself on whatever aspect or whatever thing that you use the output for. An interesting response here. One might use RDA outputs unconsciously as they become standards. Yeah, so a lot of the outputs themselves are can be just kind of a set of guidelines, or so maybe not best practice and or good practice. Yeah, that's a good point as well. That they can be sort of incorporated into people's sort of day-to-day activity, but not in any sort of formal way we are sort of recognizing the uptake, which is very interesting. Thank you for that.
Ryan, I was just thinking that this is actually a really important comment because, for example, people using Core Trust Seal, how many of them know that it is coming from an RDA working group, for example, and how many of them think it as a certification available for repositories without going into the background of it too much? I think this is actually a really important comment to take on board.
A few more responses. I'm just going to double check the time. I think we're sort of a few more questions. So we have the response on national PID strategies to inform a national PID strategy. That's pretty straightforward. We have the kind of landscape work, which I think identifying related organizations and initiatives and reference materials for research. Yeah, that's interesting sort of approach. I think we possibly included that in the previous one, but I think identifying related organizations and initiatives is definitely sort of a standalone one. And then there's a mention of RDA training program with RDA certification. I'm not quite sure I'm understanding what that is.
Is it a request for a training certification? Maybe.
Maybe you could maybe elaborate that in the chat. I'm just checking the time. Conscious we have a few more questions to move on to before we hand over. But in the interest of time, I will just move on to the next question. But thanks everybody for your responses here. And I know I see the chat is there's lots of messages in the chat, but I dare not open them because I'm sure I'll lose the screen or something. But I'll move on to the next question for now. So yeah, this is another multiple choice questions. This is a bit hopefully requires less sort of thinking and typing out. So at what levels do you use RDA recommendations and or supporting outputs? So I know, Stephanie, you mentioned earlier that your organization had used a recommendation or output in developing policies, I think. But yeah, we're just wondering at what level you use. So are you using it at an individual level, or you bring it to any work you're doing as part of your organization or your institution? If you're involved in any sort of regional initiatives, so sort of not inter-country, intra-country initiatives, let us know, at a national level or then at the international level. So, okay, the majority here for individual and organizational, institutional, which is interesting. I probably think I would have expected that. But yeah, it's good to see that the international and national level as well are accounted for. And I think you should be able to submit multiple responses to this as well. So obviously, if you are involved in different initiatives where you have made use of recommendations and or outputs or supporting outputs, that would be, please feel free to include. There's a few more responses coming in. Okay, I will another 4 or 5 seconds to respond to this before I move on. Okay, great. Oh, there we go. The last two. Okay, great. Up to 20. Very good. Thanks, everybody. And the next question then. Yeah, so this is, again, it's a free text response, a free text question. So do you think there are any other areas where recommendations and supporting outputs have an impact that we've not covered? So this is, I'm referring back specifically here to the list of sort of areas where we were talking about earlier that we're looking at in the report. So I've just got them sort of highlighted here. So if there's any other areas sort of within the European landscape, this is kind of, again, we're kind of coming back to the more looking at it from the European perspective. Is there anything that we essentially that we should be covering with this report that we're not covering? So I see there's a response here behind this, but I'll just leave this on screen first. The highlight, the hover over this thing here for a second, so people can kind of get access to it. Or if you want, you can go back and look at this list on the slides as well. I think it's around slide 6 or 7. Okay, so some of the responses here about the areas that we haven't covered. So collaborations and projects. So I think we're covering Horizon Europe funded projects, but this I guess this is more at a sort of slightly lower level for collaborations and projects. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, similar, I think maybe community and cross-organization projects. UN SDGs, that's really really interesting response. Yeah, we hadn't considered that, and that is a pretty that at the SDGs that are run through the organization. So obviously, when each those of you who are familiar with the setting up a new group process and writing a statement of work or a charter or a case statement, as they used to be called, you do have to include well, no. In the last year or so, maybe 18 months, you have to include reference to the SDGs. So yeah, that, and there's a specific RDA UN SDGs interest group as well. But I think that, yeah, that would be something we could possibly look into include in the report. Thank you. That's really good suggestion. So it's okay. We're okay for time. I'll give another minute or two on this, perhaps. Again, I'll just give people a chance to think a little bit. Alex and Lisa, is there anything in the chat maybe that is worth sort of discussing, or any questions or anything that we need covered?
Not in the chat, but sorry, Alex, but I had a question, for example, because obviously we're also a bit tied in terms of databases and information we have access to of how we can do, any mapping between RDA outputs and recommendations and the areas that we have identified. So, for example, collaborations, projects that are not Horizon funded projects. If you have any ideas of how we could reasonably approach, a mapping exercise for that, would really like to hear in the chat about that.
Another good suggestion there, an FDI consortium.
That's a good point, Lisa. I didn't I didn't purposely steer away from it, but I didn't get, so we didn't have space to cover the kind of the methodology we're using to sort of do this mapping. So yeah, so it is reliant on essentially the people within the Tiger Consortium and their knowledge of the group's activities, and supplementing that with information that we've got from the that we have essentially the mapping we've done ourselves from the groups to the various initiatives that we've described already, and also some information taken from the RDA knowledge base, which is going to be going through its beta launch at the end of this month, I think. We'll more information for that later, but that's essentially kind of providing a sort of linking a lot of the information that exists within the RDA community and the website, and at the back end of the website, and sort of making that accessible basically. And we've used that to supplement our analysis. Okay, the NFDI consortia, the grant applications, that's a good something might be of use as well. because I think they're for certain funders, the applications are relatively accessible. So that might be something we could see if we can investigate that as well. Response here to the national research infrastructures. Again, we'd have to look at each, probably just thinking back to the method, we'd have to look at these each individually, but I think that might be another way to look at it from the national perspective as well as the European level. The UNESCO recommendation on open science, that framework. Yeah, I think we that is one of the criteria when we're selecting groups. If we invite them to sort of explain how they might how their activities might align with the UNESCO open science recommendation. But I think for the purposes of this report itself, we're sort of setting the ceiling at the European level, isn't it? But I think that's definitely something we can kind of look at possibly as a future way of mapping the impact of recommendations. Okay, so we've reached 46 minutes past the hour. And I will just go on. I think we're on to the last question.
We have
so this.
Sorry to interrupt you, Rani. We have a hand. Do we want to take questions now or at the end?
Well, this is actually a perfect time. So this is the final question on the Menti. So this is to sort of set the scene for we'll allow people to sort of raise their hands and unmute now, or if people are more comfortable with putting their responses on the Menti, that will still remain open. But yeah, just the one question I will and I will switch to whoever has whoever's question to speak. So the final question here, and this you can answer this in the text, in the chat, or on Menti if you prefer, or please feel free to raise your hand. If you could enforce it, what one thing would you do to make it easier to adopt or implement recommendations and or supporting outputs? So that's either from the perspective of the recommendations and supporting outputs themselves, what would make it easier to actually use them or implement them, or from the perspective of from the outside coming to RDA, what would be one thing would make it easier for you to implement these at your organizational level or national or regional. I will zoom out of, yep. Oh, sorry, John, I'll leave it on the presentation. I will open the chat so I can see who has their hand raised. Oh, Francis, please, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I know it's about Tiger, I suppose, here, but I wouldn't set the ceiling at the European level because, firstly, the European Horizon projects and the Commission and so forth are very much involved with, for example, like the UN SDGs or UNESCO's recommendation on open science and other things as well. And also, I'm glad to see people like Stephanie here and others here who are not part of Europe, but Stephanie and others are part of European projects. So, and when we put together a consortium for Tiger or for other European projects, it's also sometimes very valuable to have people outside our small club also engaged in this too, especially through the RDA. So, just wanted to say that. That's all.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Franz. I totally agree. I think I agree with that in principle. In terms of this report, we are still limited by time and space and resource. But yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there in terms of this is RDA is an international community, and the work we're doing with Tiger is obviously tied to our European Commission funder, but obviously we still adhere to the groups we support, still adhere to all the criteria for starting a working group within RDA, in that it has to have global representation, has to address issues that are sort of cut across regional boundaries and continental boundaries. So there is a requirement there for us to support that global efforts and global sort of community effort. Yeah, that's a very valuable contribution, Francis. Thank you. Yeah, so there's a few responses here. I'm going to, at the risk of missing more hands, I'm just going to have my participants list. I'm just going to close it for a second and just to go through some of the responses. As I said, if you would prefer to raise your hand, please do so. And we will happily sort of take up the discussion from there. So yeah, it's the question, if you could enforce it, what one thing would you do to make it easier? So a couple of suggestions of kind of use cases and systematically providing examples of how to use the recommendation. Absolutely, yeah, I think that's a very good very good point. There's a few of these fall under that. Providing funding, I think, yeah, funding to do these and tied to funding requirements. That would be interesting. I guess that would be from the perspective of if people are writing funding grants, give it a funding to for the time and the efforts that it would take to implement or adopt recommendations. Translation, that's a really good point. Obviously all the amount of the vast majority of work within RDA is in English, but there is a small effort to translate some of the outputs into different languages. But yeah, I think translation will be absolutely key, I think. Systematically tracking citations to RDA outputs. Yeah, I agree with that. There's an Mint DOIs for that's going to link to the Mint DOIs for RDA outputs to track. So we do Mint DOIs for RDA outputs. They do all of DOIs, but the systematic tracking of them, I think that would be would make certainly would make our life easier in for this writing of this report. But I think for the community at large to get the sense of where they've been implemented and uptake, where there has been uptake of recommendations and outputs, will be valuable if we get that information relatively easily. So as a longer response here, encouraging the working groups to continue support after they produce the recommendations, or the recommendations are adopted by an interest group to provide support, gather adoption stories. That's a good suggestion. I think there has been examples of that taking place sort of organically. So I'm thinking just recently about the National PID Strategies Working Group, which was one of the working groups that we were supported via Tiger. They developed into an interest group later on to kind of facilitate that uptake and adoption of their recommendation. So, but yeah, that's having that as a sort of criteria, or not criteria, maybe stipulation or option, maybe make that more clear for people. That would be interesting. An adoption stories session in RDA sessions, I think that would be another useful approach to this. Making sure outputs are maintained and don't become outdated. Again, I think that would be absolutely a useful. The acronym list and glossary. Again, these are all really useful suggestions. Alex, you have your hand raised, and I think I'm conscious of the fact that we're coming up to time, and hand over to Lisa.
I
ahead,
just
Alex.
wanted to quickly ask a clarification about the adoption story session in RDA sessions, because plenaries do have adoption, dedicated adoption sessions. So do you mean that the breakout sessions should be consistently include adoption, like the working group sessions should include their adoption, some sort of tracking? Or Francoise, was that you?
I did not write the comment,
All
but
right.
it's not always, there is not always an adoption session in the plenaries. Whereas, to my understanding of it, I am not sure at all that it's systematic.
Okay.
There was one in Salzburg, I remember. There used to be one, but I am not sure they are always.
We've had one in Costa Rica as well.
I think the general sort of.
It's good to take it as a rule for the for plenaries. You know, you add it to the manual for plenaries, and it will be useful.
Thanks.
I'd agree with that, Francois. Yeah, it would be good impetus for people to, encourage people to more actively engage, people who've produced recommendations, outputs, to actively pursue those adoption stories. At the risk of cutting off what potentially could be a really interesting conversation, we are coming at the 5 minutes at the time, and I do have to hand over to my colleague Lisa. I will leave this last section of the Menti open, so that should be there. So if you have any other questions or comments, please do feel free to add them. But for now, I will go back to sharing my screen. Lisa, I think I'm sharing the last few slides.
Yes, if you could, that would be great.
Yep, no problem. Thanks everybody for all your inputs there, and I will hand over now to my colleague Lisa Letsalu, who will just give a bit of a background on the remaining activities that are taking place, or other activities that are taking place within Tiger at the moment.
So hi from my side to everybody, and thank you for excellent participation and providing us with loads of feedback and things to consider. I'm now changing subject a bit, so sorry for that. But we very quickly wanted to run over the currently open opportunities through RDA Tiger so that all of you would be aware of them and wouldn't miss anything. So we currently actually have 3 funding opportunities or in-kind support opportunities that are open, ranging from our open calls to cascading grants and travel grants. So our open calls, which many of you I think are already familiar with, are calls for in-kind support from RDA Tiger Consortium, or for small grants for RDA working groups to work with external experts. And this is a rolling call that's always open, and our next deadline is May 31st. I also want to highlight that since the project is nearing its end, this is one of the, it's not the last, but it's one of the last open deadlines. Then we also have our second cascading grant call that it's open, and in our second cascade grant, we focus on supporting adoption, returning to discussion about adoption that we started just before. This is an opportunity for both existing RDA working groups, but importantly also for individuals or organizations not part of RDA working groups who wish to adopt an RDA output or recommendation. And here the deadline is April 27th. So you still have good 2.5 weeks to put something together. And finally, we have travel grants that we just opened for applications last week, and where the application deadline is June 2nd. And those travel grants are there to explicitly support travel to Plenary 25 in Brisbane. For the cascading grants and travel grants, there's also discussion spaces in WUBA. So please come and ask your questions there, because we are running out of time and don't have time currently to answer any questions, but there's a space there to come and ask all your questions. Or, if you click on the links or open the QR link, you find our contact details as well for any questions. And next slide, please. And I also wanted to highlight an upcoming webinar, or our RDA Knowledge Base beta launch, that's going to take place on Wednesday, April 23rd at 3 p.m. Central European Summer Time. So morning in the Americas, and unfortunately late in the evening in Australasia, but I hope still many of you are able to join. We'll introduce the RDA knowledge graph, knowledge base that we have been working on within the RDA Tiger project, and that aims to create a comprehensive database of RDA related data and facilitate the use of those outputs and recommendations. So this is all from my side. Come to Community and Hula and we can talk about all of it more.
Thanks all, and that is exactly on time. Perfect timing. Thank you all so much. Thank you to my colleagues from RDA Europe and the RDA Tiger Consortium for the presentations, and thank you so much to our attendees for the incredible engagement and feedback. Special thanks to those that came at ungodly times for them. We really appreciate you being here. And with this, we're closing. As I said in the beginning, all the feedback that we got from you today will fit into the report. And the full report will be published in December 2025, but there will be snapshots of the analysis as we are progressing it throughout 2025. So thank you again so much. Enjoy the rest of the plenary and see you in another virtual room soon. Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.